But let's talk about now briefly the events of yesterday in Parliament Square, because about 900 people were arrested at a demonstration against what is happening in Gaza. Hundreds gathered in Parliament Square. It's about 1,500 people. So that's quite an arrest ratio, 900 out of 1,500 people. And they gathered there to both show their support for the Palestinians in Gaza and to oppose the proscription of the group Palestine Action. And the people were arrested for holding up cards that read, "I oppose genocide, I support Palestine Action." Let's talk about this with Danny Shaw. Danny Shaw is a crime and justice expert. Hello, Danny.
Good evening, Nick. Hi.
Do you think the government overreacted by banning Palestine Action under terrorism laws?
I think that's a very difficult question to answer, Nick, because we don't have the full intelligence picture that government ministers have. And the then Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, has told us that there is information that can't be shared because of ongoing legal proceedings. She will also have been privy when she made the decision to prescribe Palestine Action to information assembled by security experts and analysts from the Joint Terrorism Analysis Centre that does an assessment about the threat posed by Palestine Action. We do know from what's in the public domain that they have admitted responsibility for dozens of incidents and attacks over the past few years, including the attack at Brize Norton, RAF Brize Norton in Oxfordshire, which caused £7 million of damage to 2 aircraft. So that's why it's difficult to say whether it's the right decision to prescribe. I certainly think they meet the conditions under the Terrorism Act, the definition of terrorism, but just because they meet the definitions doesn't mean they should have been prescribed. Could there have been other ways to deal with this group and its actions and what it was doing, which was clearly, criminal damage on quite a large scale? Plus assaults on a smaller scale. I think certainly a police officer was attacked with a sledgehammer in one of the incidents. So I think it's difficult to say, sorry to sit on the fence, but that's because we are now seeing the repercussions of the prescription with, as you've said, 857 people were arrested yesterday for supporting Palestine Action out of the total number. Others were arrested for other offences. And even before yesterday, across the country, there have been over 800 people arrested for supporting Palestine Action. So, I mean, the Metropolitan Police in particular, but other forces and the Crown Prosecution Service have now got a huge job to process all these cases, to deal with these people who've expressed their support for the organisation. And that is really going to clog up the criminal justice system and distract officers from dealing with what I would say are real terrorists and real suspects and dangerous people who are plotting and potentially serious attacks.
Yeah, I mean, the police have said that the protest required, in their words, significant resources and took officers away from neighbourhoods to the detriment of Londoners. That's their phrase. But it was their choice, wasn't it, to flood the area, wasn't it? Or do you think that they have perhaps been lent on by the government as an attempt to put a stop to the negative publicity that this is causing them?
OK, I don't think the police have been lent on by the government. I think if you go back, I think it's quite clear that the Commissioner of the Met, Samart Rowley, was advocating the prescription of this group. If you look at his comments that he made in July, it's quite clear that he has said publicly that the Met laid out a case for ministers to consider prescribing Palestine Action. So he's been quite robust in his comments about the group. And I think the officers, the senior officers who've been making the decisions are basically taking their lead from him. He clearly regards this group as a terrorist group, and that because they've been banned, there's going to be a zero-tolerance approach to anyone who shows support for it. Now, I think, could the Metropolitan Police have shown a bit more discretion and understanding that this was a highly controversial step to outlaw this group, because it's the cause of Palestine and Gaza and what's going on is an extremely popular cause. OK, people might not understand everything about Palestine Action, but the cause is very popular, and I think the two have become blurred. And, could the Met have taken a slightly different approach of warning people, and then perhaps if they repeatedly go and wave banners and placards and all the rest of it, then go and arrest them, that might have been, in my view, a better approach. But they've taken a zero tolerance line, and now they are lumbered with literally hundreds of cases to process.
Yeah, and Keir Starmer has now essentially lumbered himself with politically damaging images of nuns in their 80s and blind men in wheelchairs getting arrested. Yet now he appears unable to undo the ban on the group for fear of the embarrassment that would come from that. Was that a fair statement?
Yeah. I think it is. I think it is, Nick. I think, prescription, the banning of a group that's linked to terrorism was not designed to criminalise hundreds of otherwise law-abiding people who feel that this is blighting their rights to protest. So I think this is a very blunt tool to address a particular problem. The government is facing a legal challenge over the prescription of Palestine action. It may go to the Court of Appeal in the next couple of months, but that's not clear because the government's actually brought a challenge to try and block that in the courts. But if it does go to the Court of Appeal, there might be some people in government who will be quietly hoping that the court gives them a get-out and rules that it was unlawful to prescribe the group. Because that would give them a bit of a way out over this, although it will be intensely embarrassing for them to do so. But apart from that, I can't see them backing down. And Shabana Mahmood, the new Home Secretary, was on a visit today to the control room at Scotland Yard, that's overseeing the operation yesterday, rather, and has posted, a tweet, and I think basically saying, support for Palestine action is not the same as support for Palestine, and it's not. But unfortunately, there are hundreds of people that basically feel that, so strongly about this that they're prepared to risk prosecution and conviction. I should just say, conviction for supporting Palestine action, even if you're just holding up a banner, has really serious implications. Okay, the maximum sentence is 6 months in prison. These people are not going to go to prison. They'll get a suspended sentence or a community order or something. But much more serious than that, you will have a criminal record with a terrorism conviction to your name, which will mean you won't be able to travel to the United States, to Australia, and potentially to countries in Europe next year when the new European travel system, ETIAS, comes into effect. It will also be incumbent upon you, if you've got a conviction, to disclose it to future employers, universities if you want to study, voluntary groups if you want to do voluntary work. Terrorism conviction has serious ramifications, and I'm not sure that everyone has thought that through.
Well, yes. I think among the people who haven't thought that through are the government themselves. I mean, is it not utterly ludicrous that a nun in her 80s is now labelled a terrorist sympathiser?
Well, I agree. I don't think that this act and the measures that the government took were designed to criminalise people like her. That's not really why they did it. They did it because they were really concerned about the activities of this group that they felt were damaging national security and national infrastructure, and that they felt this was the best means of taking them out, if you like, of disrupting them. Now, I think that there was an alternative way they could have pursued, which happened in the 70s, 80s, 90s and early 2000s when we faced wave after wave of attacks from the Animal Liberation Front, animal activists, letter bomb campaigns, fire bombings, people being stalked and attacked, harassed. It was, a long-running campaign, but they were never prescribed as a terrorist organisation. The group were basically investigated, prosecuted, infiltrated, and convicted, and eventually they decided to sort of abandon their violent tactics in the early 2000s, with many of their supporters locked up. Now, government has decided not to go down that road. decided to go down the prescription road. And as I said at the beginning, I don't know all the intelligence and all the material upon which that decision was based. So I think I have to be cautious about saying it was the wrong decision. But it's very difficult to understand why they didn't consider alternatives. And if they didn't, why they didn't. And if they did, there must be a very, very good argument for not going down and using those alternative methods that they used against animal rights campaigners.
Yeah, and just finally, I mean, it is pretty ironic, isn't it, that the protesters were arrested in Parliament Square in the shadow of statues of Nelson Mandela and the suffragette Millicent Fawcett, both of whom had been labelled as terrorists before their images were placed on plinths outside Parliament. Yeah,
I mean, I'm sure that, government ministers will be aware of those images and how difficult that is. I mean, I don't think there's been a situation before when a group has been banned, outlawed as a terrorist organisation, but where it's commanded such popular support, or where the cause that it's sort of fighting for is so popular. Of course, there are some people who will sympathise with Al-Qaeda or ISIS and so on and other groups when they were banned, but nothing on the scale of this. But, I mean, there is just one other thing to say. There was another demonstration yesterday, Nick, by Palestine Coalition. That's, groups of people who are protesting against the Israeli government's treatment of Palestinians in Gaza. 20,000 people went on that demonstration, we're told by the Met Police. And there were no issues there around, mass arrests. So the police are saying you can still protest, make your point about Gaza, your support for Palestine, but don't support this group because it's a banned terrorist organisation. So, there are different sides to this story. I think without knowing the full intelligence picture, it's hard to know just who's in the right.
Very good to talk to you, Danny. Thanks very much for your time. That's Danny Shaw, the crime and justice expert, Danny Shaw. Now, a short break, and then back to your thoughts about Labour's current travails, because it doesn't appear to be getting much better. They're now being attacked